Welcome back to A People's Historian, the show where we read about 30 minutes of history together. My name is Jason Kishinev, and we're reading A State of War, A Secret History of the CIA and the Bush Administration. Remember, if you like the episode, hit that like button and the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell so you get notified when I make the next video. Let's dig in. A key source of nuclear technology for Jafar's new team was the United States itself. In fact, Jafar had recommended using the EMIS process in part because so much old American technological information was publicly available. A major breakthrough for the team came in 1982 when Imad Khoury, the head of information programs for Jafar's team, traveled to the United States and obtained Manhattan Project designs for EMIS from public sources in American libraries. When Khoury returned to Baghdad, Saad Tawfiq and the other scientists were given Manhattan Project data related to their subsystems. Saad came to the United States to obtain crucial data as well. In 1983, he attended a professional conference in Houston and joined the Instrumentation Society of America, which issued instrumentation standards critical for Saad's systems. With his membership in the ISA, the organization regularly shipped Saad dozens of books and sophisticated software packages produced in the United States that helped him mechanize the design procedures his team was working on. By 1987, the EMIS program was working just as Jafar had hoped. Iraq was slowly making progress in uranium enrichment, and Jafar's team had developed several prototypes of EMIS separators. There were some glitches, particularly when Jafar insisted that the team deviate from the processes used by the Manhattan Project. Still, they had managed to work for 6 years without anyone outside the regime detecting their operation, certainly not the International Atomic Energy Agency, the Israelis, or even the Americans. Despite the later fears and suspicions of the CIA, Iraq did not need to buy uranium from Niger in order to provide fuel for a bomb. Early on, Jafar's team relied on small amounts of uranium furnished by the Italians in the late 1970s. Later, a small quantity of uranium was purchased from Brazil. Once Jafar's team was ready for full-scale production, there was plenty of uranium in Iraq. It was extracted from a phosphate mining region known as Akashat. To handle the natural uranium, Jafar's team built a uranium purification plant in a hilly area 30 kilometers west of Mosul and began mining uranium in the Akashat region in the early 1980s. Later, before the Second Gulf War, when Saad Tawfiq heard the allegations of Iraqi uranium purchases from Niger, he knew that the information did not come from anyone in Iraq who knew anything. By the way, you notice that little reference to uranium in Niger, and you'll remember a couple years ago, depending on when you're watching this, that some soldiers, American soldiers, were killed in Niger, and nobody knew what American soldiers were doing there. And now you do. There's uranium in Niger. Throughout the mid-1980s, a string of facilities related to the EMIS process were clandestinely constructed, giving Iraq a large nuclear infrastructure that the West had still not detected. But in late 1987, Saddam Hussein, evidently impatient with the slow pace of the project, placed his thuggish son-in-law, Hussein Kamal, in charge of the nuclear program. Kamal saw the nuclear program as the crown jewel in the regime's weapon of mass destruction efforts, but his demands to accelerate the program, creating new teams to enrich uranium through more advanced means, ultimately backfired. The Iraqi campaign to obtain dual-use technology for the more advanced techniques demanded by Kemal attracted unwanted international attention and suspicion. We had always wanted to do things indigenously, but Hussein Kemal thought you should just go out and buy what you need, recalled Saad. Two of Hussein Kemal's men were arrested at Heathrow Airport for trying to buy American nuclear triggers. Jafar's effort to mask the program was unraveling. It was Saddam Hussein's decision to invade Kuwait in 1990 that proved to be the fatal mistake. The nuclear program had become a major enterprise with at least 8,000 workers, yet it was still 2 or 3 years away from producing a weapon. 8 separators had been installed for the EMIS program, but significantly enriched uranium production was still far in the future. If Saddam had waited to attack until the nuclear team was ready, his power and influence in the Middle East might have been secured. But with the Kuwaiti invasion came intense and unrealistic pressure on the team to produce. Hussein Kemal ordered that they work around the clock during the long months between the time of the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait and the U.S.-led Desert Storm campaign. Saad Tawfiq spent almost every waking moment during those months at the nuclear facilities. There was discussion of trying to rig a dirty bomb, an explosive device stuffed with radioactive material already on hand, but the orders never came and the plan was abandoned. In the end, Jafar's team could not produce the bomb that Saddam needed to ward off the international coalition. The end for the nuclear program came almost by accident. The Americans destroyed the Iraqi program from the air without even realizing it. In early 1991, a U.S. aircraft that had completed its raid on another Iraqi target had turned for home with 2 bombs left. The pilot began searching for another target to drop his remaining weapons and was directed to a complex of buildings in Tarmiya, about 30 kilometers north of Baghdad, that the United States apparently believed was part of the Iraqi Military Industrialization Commission. The pilot bombed the largest buildings in the complex and headed for home. Surveillance photos of the bomb damage intrigued American targeteers. There was unusual activity around the damaged buildings, and the Iraqi behavior at the bomb site suggested that this compound was more important than previously believed. A B-52 strike was ordered to hit it again. The B-52 carpet bombing utterly destroyed the Tarmiya uranium enrichment facility, known to the Iraqis as the Safa factory. It effectively ended Iraq's nuclear ambitions. Jafar's program never recovered. By May 1991, UN weapons inspectors were in Iraq trying to determine the state of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction programs. At the time, they still did not know that Iraq had had an EMIS program, and Saddam Hussein wanted to keep it that way. In June, Saad and other members of Jafar's team were called into the presidential palace and told by Jafar that the program was over and that they must now get rid of all the evidence of its existence. My orders were to destroy or hide all incriminating evidence and leave only the equipment that could be shown to be dual-use technology. The author doesn't say who they're quoting right there. I assume that's Saad. Or maybe it's Jafar. I'm not sure. In the space of 22 frantic hours, Saad and other scientists loaded equipment onto 150 tractor trailers and escorted them out into the western desert. The scientists tagged the equipment as best they could, but so much of it was thrown into the trucks and jumbled together that it was difficult to keep track of it all. For Saad, the worst came late one night when he and his truck convoy got lost in the desert, uncertain which way to head. Finally, the truckloads were turned over to Saddam's special security force to conceal and bury. It wasn't long before the IAEA inspectors began to figure out that Taimyr had been the site of an enrichment facility. In the summer of 1991, the Iraqi regime's lies about its past nuclear program began to unravel. Under mounting pressure, Hussein Kamel flip-flopped and ordered the scientists not to hide anything. There were so many changing orders. Hide everything, then don't hide anything, recalled Saad. About 3 months after the tractor trailers loaded with equipment had first gone into the desert, the inspectors were shown the buried equipment. The combined force of the bombing raids during the war and the inspections afterward brought the nuclear program to a close. The program was finished and we had no purpose in life, Saad recalled. In March 1992, Hussein Kamel convinced Saddam to let him keep the nuclear scientists together within his organization, the Military Industrialization Commission. There, Saad and the rest of the team found themselves working on Hussein Kamel's pet industrial projects, all the while knowing that they were biding their time until the UN inspections and sanctions were lifted so they could resume their nuclear work. Hussein Kamel's idea was to keep people together under the MIC and then see what happened, recalled Saad. In the meantime, we were there to work on Hussein Kamel's dreams. Any staff member from the team who left to find other work were arrested and jailed until they agreed to return to the MIC. Yet as the inspections and the sanctions dragged on throughout the 1990s, it became less and less likely that the nuclear program could be easily reconstituted. Finally, in 1995, Hussein Kamel defected, then redefected, and was executed. The MIC and Jafar's teams drifted in his wake. Money for Saad and his team began to dry up, and the scientists had to scramble to find new projects to work on. By the time his sister Sasan arrived in 2002, oh yeah, that's right, remember her? I forgot about her. By the time she arrived in 2002, with war once again looming, Saad was still at the MIC working to develop a nitric acid plant for fertilizer production and was also teaching on the side at the University of Technology in Baghdad. It wasn't doing anything that could lead to the development of a nuclear bomb because Iraq's nuclear program had been dead for more than a decade. Sasan could tell that her brother was very nervous about her visit and that he was reluctant to speak candidly. Despite all of Iraq's problems, he and his family had carved out a reasonably comfortable life for themselves in Baghdad. His children were in good schools, and he was reluctant to do anything to upset his family's status. He was not into cloak and dagger stuff, Sasan remembered later. He refused to take any time off work while Sasan was visiting, and he was clearly afraid to bring attention to the fact that his American relative was in Baghdad at a time when political tensions were so high. When they finally were able to find time alone to talk late on that second night, Sasan and Saad took a walk outside. She quietly told him that the CIA wanted him to defect. They want you to get to the Kurdish zone. Her brother scoffed. How can I get across to the Kurdish area? They are always watching. It was impossible, Saad told her, particularly since the CIA wasn't offering him any help to get out of Baghdad. As planned, Sasson then told Saad that the CIA had given her questions to ask him about the Iraqi nuclear weapons program. How close were the Iraqis to having a nuclear warhead? How much weapons-grade fuel did Iraq already have? How advanced is the centrifuge program? What process are you using for isotope separation? Where are the weapons factories? Can you identify the scientists involved in the weapons program? Saad Tawfiq gave his sister a look of worldly incredulity. Where did they come up with those questions? Don't they know that there is no nuclear program? Sasson was stunned. He just kept saying there is nothing, she remembered later. The nuclear program had been dead since 1991, he explained. There is nothing left. There hasn't been for over a decade. They must know that. Sasson tried to continue with her list of questions, but they all seemed to Saad to be the product of some fantasy. We don't have the resources to make anything anymore, he told her. We don't even have enough spare parts for our conventional military. We can't even shoot down an airplane. We don't have anything left. If the sanctions are ever lifted, then Saddam is certain to restart the programs, but there is nothing now. Saad told his sister that he was fed up with all the talk of war and that maybe between the two of them, they now had an opportunity to do something about it. Now he was briefly starting to get energized by her visit. Maybe if we tell the CIA that we don't have anything, no weapons, maybe there won't be another war. Saad told his sister that he worried that America was going to invade for no reason. When there was nothing left of the weapons program, he had seen the effects of war on Iraq before, and he didn't think the country could stand another. It was sometimes hard for the brother and sister to find time to talk privately during the 10-day stay. Saad was teaching at the university, but also had to attend meetings at night related to his primary job as a manager at Iraq's Military Industrialization Commission. Excuse me. Saad also had a secretary who came to his house several times while Sasson was visiting. Only after the 2003 war did Saad discover that she was an informant for Iraqi intelligence. One night they couldn't arrange time alone until 2 a.m. Sasson again suggested they take a walk outside. Saad said no. They would arouse suspicions, and their actions might be reported. So he unplugged the telephones and turned up the volume on the television, and they whispered to each other. Sasson told her brother that the CIA wanted to know what he thought about information they had received from one former Iraqi scientist who had defected to the United States, and who was now telling the Americans that Iraq still had weapons of mass destruction. Saad was dismissive, saying that the guy was a phony and never knew anything. He was just saying those things to get paid. Just before Sasson left to return to the United States, Saad told her again that he didn't think it would be worthwhile for him to risk trying to defect. Why take the risk, he said, when all I can tell them is that there is no program. It would be up to Sasson to carry that message back to the CIA. Sasson flew home to Cleveland in mid-September and was quickly contacted by the CIA, which then flew her to Washington for a series of meetings with the agency's analysts. 4 CIA officers met Sasson in a hotel in suburban Virginia, eager to debrief their agent from Iraq. Sasson told the CIA that her brother was unable to answer their carefully prepared list of questions because there was no nuclear weapons program in Iraq. She explained that the defector they were relying on for information about the nuclear program didn't know what he was talking about. She said that Saad had said that even before the first Gulf War, Iraq was 3 years away from producing a nuclear bomb, and that the program had been abandoned after the war. Saad told her that there was no effort underway to rebuild the nuclear program. It would have been impossible to restart the program without it being noticed, he'd said. She apologized that she was unable to get specific answers for many of their detailed questions, but her brother had repeatedly told her that there simply wasn't any nuclear program. "I'm sorry I don't have more for you." As they sat and listened to Sasson in the Virginia hotel room, the CIA officials all nodded and seemed sympathetic. "Every answer is helpful," they told her. Sasson noticed that they didn't even seem surprised that her brother had insisted that there were no nuclear weapons programs. "What about purchases of uranium from overseas?" Sasson had been told to ask Saad about the Niger shipments. "No, Saad said that was not going on," Sasson recounted. "Nothing like that was going on. In fact," Sasson said, "Saad kept wondering where the CIA was getting these crazy questions." "This is good," the CIA men repeated. "All the information you brought us is good." Sasson's debriefing lasted a couple of hours, and then the CIA men packed up, thanked Sasson for her time, and put her back on a plane for Cleveland. After she returned home, Chris from the CIA's Pittsburgh station came to visit again, and this time brought a small gift, a wood and glass case containing a folded American flag that he had flown over CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. It had flown over CIA headquarters, not he had flown. Excuse me. The CIA, he told her, wanted to express its gratitude for her bravery. Sasson was touched, but something Chris said to her husband during the visit worried her. "We think that Saad is lying to Sasson," Chris told Sasson's husband. "We think he knows much more than he is willing to tell her." To Sasson's husband, that didn't make any sense, and he said so. "Why would he lie? What does he have to gain from it? You wanted him to defect, but he said there was no program to talk to you about." The CIA man smiled, nodded, and left. Sasson al-Haddad's debriefing report was filed along with all the others from the family members who had agreed to return to Baghdad to contact Iraqi weapons scientists. All of them, some 30, had said the same thing. They all reported to the CIA that the scientists had said that Iraq's programs to develop nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons had long since been abandoned. Charlie Allen's program to use family members to contact dozens of Iraqi scientists had garnered remarkable results and given the CIA an accurate assessment of the abandoned state of Iraq's weapons programs months before the U.S. invasion in March 2003. CIA officials ignored the evidence and refused to even disseminate the reports from the family members to senior policymakers in the Bush administration. Sources say that the CIA's Directorate of Operations, which was supposed to be in charge of all of the agency's clandestine intelligence operations, was jealous of Allen's incursions into its operational turf and shut down his program and denigrated its results. President Bush never heard about the visits or the interviews. The agency's Directorate of Intelligence, in charge of analyzing information collected by the agency's spies and other sources, did not even consider using the information from the family members. Analysts responsible for intelligence reports on Iraqi weapons of mass destruction never included any of it in their assessments. The reports from the family members of Iraqi scientists were buried in the bowels of the CIA and were never released for distribution to the State Department, Pentagon, or the White House. The CIA had obtained hard evidence that Saddam Hussein had abandoned his efforts to obtain weapons of mass destruction, and the agency chose not to share that information with the President of the United States, who was about to send American troops to fight and die in Iraq. Sasan's dangerous trip into the heart of Saddam Hussein's Iraq had been for nothing. Saad Tawfiq's desperate hope that his sister could carry a message back to the CIA that might prevent a war was dashed by the petty turf battles and tunnel vision of the agency's officials. In October 2002, 1 month after Sasan al-Haddad's trip to Baghdad, the U.S. intelligence community issued a comprehensive report known as National Intelligence Estimate on the status of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction. It was supposed to be the agency's best effort to pull together everything known about Saddam Hussein's weapons program while providing the intelligence community's most judicious assessments of where the programs were headed in the future. It confidently stated that Iraq is reconstituting its nuclear program. One of the only advantages to living next door to the headquarters of the Iraqi intelligence service was good television reception. By accident, Saad Tawfiq had discovered that with a few adjustments, it was possible for him to capture the satellite television feed as it beamed down into the intelligence headquarters next door. Since Iraqi intelligence officials were obligated to know what the world was saying about their extremely demanding boss, Saddam Hussein, they got all the Western news channels, including the BBC and CNN. Free satellite television didn't make up for the shattered windows, blown out doors, and other collateral damage his house had suffered over the previous decade, but it was something. From his home in Baghdad in February 2003, Saad Tawfiq watched Secretary of State Colin Powell's televised presentation to the United Nations about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction. As Powell dramatically built the American case for war, Saad sank further and further into frustration and despair. They didn't listen. I told them there were no weapons. And that's interesting, the author's account, that the CIA did not give that information to the president. And, earlier we were talking about plausible deniability. Did they actually give it to the president and are not honest about it? Who ordered the CIA to not give the information to the president? If that's truthful, I guess we all have our theories, right? There's really only a couple of choices. Hope to see you in the next episode. Thanks for joining me. Hit that like and subscribe button. See you next time.